Paganism, animism, and the plant spirit path. What are the overlaps? What are the differences? What's the BS? There's a lot of that going around. So first, we have this dream, this fantasy, that there is one unified paganism, the nature-based, animistic folk traditions of pre-Christian Europe, and everybody was doing the same thing and on the same page, and this could not be further than the truth. Paganism is, in its ancient expression and its modern neo-pagan expression, as diverse as modern Christianity. I mean, there are so many different ways that what we now call paganism, which of course is not a term that those folks would have ever used to call themselves, what we call paganism was a diverse and oftentimes radically divergent set of beliefs and perspectives and experiences and rituals that there really isn't a consensus. We can talk about specific cultural paganisms like Irish paganism, different types of Welsh paganism, early British paganism, but we can't umbrella term paganism. It doesn't work. It's not fair to the indigenous cultures, the ancestral cultures of different people. It's not fair to assume that Welsh folks were doing the same thing that British folks were doing because they both existed during a time of paganism. It's not fair to impose, ideas of Welsh paganism on Irish paganism. Like, it just doesn't work. So we need to not do that. So paganism for me, and the way that I work with this term, which I'm really glad we have, because it does give us a way to sort of talk about the things that are similar, because those do exist, the similarities, and to sort of engage in a conversation around what, generally pan-European, but specifically Western and Northern Europe was doing before Christianity came and saved it all, right? Because there was actually something happening there, something quite beautiful and quite rich and quite powerful. So paganisms can have a few different overlapping things. And again, this is based on my understanding and my research and my experience. I may not be 100% on point, but I'm not going to share anything I don't feel very confident about. And that the one thing that I think stands out among all of the overlaps is animism. That our ancient pre-conversion folk traditions were land-based, meaning that all of the mythologies, all of the beliefs, the perspectives, the rituals were all centered around the land and the place where the people lived, and how the land responded to their presence and how they worked in harmony with the land. The land was the teacher. So we have that aspect. We also know quite certainly that the general animistic perspective was pretty much the status quo in all pagan traditions, with all the different cultures that paganism showed up in. So real paganism, ancient paganism, implied that folks walked out into a world that was filled with people, that they navigated relationships that went beyond the human, that they understood that their actions had reactions that transcended or went beyond human law or human expectation, that they lived in a world shared by spirits, by non-human and more than human beings, spirits that could be perceived like animals and plants, spirits that could not be easily perceived like deities and the ancestors. So there was a tapestry, there was a richness, a network of being that was, I think, commonplace enough to these folk that there probably really wasn't a word to describe it. Like, it's kind of like, what else would there be? Of course, there's all kinds of people that live here, not just humans. The ideas of human exceptionalism that really led to wanton destruction of the environment, capitalism, colonialism, all of that were fueled by religions that taught humans that they had some special power, special dominance over nature. Until people came in and came in with that bullshit, no one thought that. People, it was quite clear to people that their actions had repercussions, and that to live in harmony with nature, with the land, with the seasons, with the other people that were not human, that shared space with us, was a good thing to do. Even if all of that was motivated by purely selfish means, to get more luck, better crops, better health, there was still an understanding of it. And, now the capitalist sort of structure is the status quo. And so when we have these discussions about this other way of being, it feels super novel, and super cute to us because we've never seen anything like it. But actually, the world's indigenous traditions, this is the normal, and there is no other option than to be in right relationship with the world. So paganism, as a land-based or nature-based spiritual practice and perspective, rooted fiercely in the animism that we see across time and place before conversions and colonizations happen. Not to say that within the greater universe of paganism there was not war and famine and conquering and all of that, because there absolutely was. There was also an awareness that to conquer somebody else's tribe or village, you also had to make good with their gods, whether that was trapping and silencing their gods so they couldn't be protective, or getting them to like you so that you could succeed, right? There was a slightly different perspective of how it all went down. So really, our similarities within paganism is animism, is that idea that we live in a world filled with people, that our relationships and the way that we interface with that otherness is crucial to our well-being as individuals and as a species, a human species, and that the sort of neo-concepts of the threefold law of return and karma even, and all of that are late, and really we don't see them happen in real life. We don't ever see them actually happen. So for me, there's empirical evidence they're not true. What we do know is that when we're not in right relationship with the world, with nature, things just don't go well. And that we can experience. We all know how it feels when we are walking a track of synergy. We're in the right place at the right time. All of our relationships are harmonized. We have a connection to the other world, and we're firmly planted on the land that we're in. This is where real power and beauty and harmony comes from. And we all know what it feels like to be super out of step with all of that, right? And how uncomfortable that feels, and that discomfort and that disalignment and disharmony leads to, all kinds of fumbles. So this is an important part of our work at understanding that animism is the original, the ancient, the spirit world motivated expression of perspective and action that invites the human person into being part of what's happening instead of dominant over or at the whim of some nature that hates us, right? We are an important thread in the tapestry of the cosmos, and animism is our invitation back into it for those of us who have been distanced from it for one reason or another. So how all of this influences the green art. The green art is a specialist sorceress practice. It is a path for folks who want to work deeply with the persons of the plants, with the plant spirits, and lots of other non-human people that surround that work, like various deities and various ancestral streams that are very wrapped up in the plant world, right? And we can practice this work, this sorceress art. This is why we call it an art and a craft, right? That it can fit anywhere. We do this with a full awareness that it can dovetail. It can kind of sneak under the umbrella of animism, of paganism, of lots of other traditions, as long as they're not in direct conflict with these core ideas of, non-human exceptionalism, the world being filled with people, the cruciality of right relationships, and the importance of perspective and practice, that we have to do what we think and think what we do. It's not armchair philosophy. Animism is a verb. It's what we do, as is herbalism, really. So that's a far different conversation. But the green art as an art dovetails really beautifully with lots of nature-based traditions. We see lots of people coming out of neo-witchcraft, like neo-ideas of witchcraft, and realizing that the animism is missing, that the spirit relationships are missing, that the ability to move between the worlds, which is really the core ability, the core craft of the green art, is missing, that it's been reduced to recipes and how-tos and rituals that have no depth or meaning for the person, to no real connection to the land or the cycles, to just kind of doing what needs to be done or what you should be doing, or what looks good on the social medias. So a lot of folks coming out of that tradition, a lot of folks practicing their indigenous or ancestral varieties of paganism, however that looks here and now, however it's kind of been reawoken or reimagined, or simply just evolved into where we are, because there are definitely traditions that have not, been destroyed. They've just been quieted or silenced in some cases, that people can go on doing all of the things they usually do, doing all of their ancestral ways, doing all of their cultural ways, while also including their work with the green art, because we are through and through fully codependent on the plants for everything. And so for me, from my perspective, especially now where, the environmental crises and capitalism and, many of our political experiments that we're doing are clearly failing, there's no more better time than now to reconnect to these spirits who offer so much providence. They've just taken care of us continuously through our wins and our losses. The things that we do right and the things we do terribly wrong, they continue to show up. And I believe and experience that no matter what type of nature-based, ideally non-dogmatic, spiritual path you follow, there is room, at least to some degree, for a deeper cultivation of connection to the plant spirits, the mighty plant spirits. And within pretty much all the pagan traditions I've ever studied or read about, there are also deities, members of the pantheons, members of the god families, who have special affinity with the plants. They protect the plants, or they're the deities who know all the plant mysteries, that understand the magic and the medicinal virtues of the plants, or the deities that taught humans how to farm, or when to harvest, or how to make medicine. And so we already know that within greater paganism, there were consistently human folk, who had these sort of specialties of healer, of midwife, of visionary, who moved between the worlds and knew the secrets of the plants. Otherwise, there would be no connection to a deity who acted as patron or guide, right? There's no need to have a word for a wheel if a culture doesn't have a wheel. So within that context, there are those of us who this becomes kind of our specialization, right? It becomes our craft and our art within the greater context of animism or a specific cultural paganism. Or for some folks like me, this is pretty much all I do. This is my spiritual path. And we can go anywhere from having a cursory understanding of the personhood of plants and how they play into our myths and lore and legends and stories as part of our culture, all the way to being a practicing, ideally spiritual herbalist or gardener or farmer, and even further into being somebody who works deeply with the plant spirits in the green realm in service of their community and the folks that they take care of. So there's a lot of overlap. And in fact, there are moments for me when the lines between paganism, animism, and the green art, as I practice it and understand them, are so fuzzy that I kind of feel like I'm doing all of it at once, and sometimes so fuzzy that I'm not really sure what I'm doing. But I think those are good feelings to have. Keep you on your feet. Make sure that you're constantly evaluating your perspective and what you're doing in life to check those relationships. So I think this is a super interesting conversation, and for folks who are engaged in a specific tradition that we would put in under that big pagan umbrella, that big pagan canopy, or cultural traditions that we would call pagan. I'm very interested to know, to learn about your experiences of how plants show up for you in that way, and how they've sort of worked their way into your life ways and your views and your rituals, the lore, the mythology of your cultures and your traditions, because they are there. In fact, they may be the most common thread between all of our different extant pagan and neo-pagan traditions. The plants sure do just keep poking up through the concrete, reminding us that they are liminal beings who connect us to the root of things, and that for all the things we have forgotten, they remember.